Hello everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now. That's how YouTube keeps sending you more chilling stories like this. And now, let the night begin with Story 1, The Man Who Knew My Schedule. I was standing in the parking garage when I realized the phone in my hand had been tracking me for 8 months, feeding every location, every movement, every pattern of my life to someone I'd never given permission to. And he was standing 30 feet away, watching me figure it out. It started about 3 months after I moved to Denver for work. I'm a marketing coordinator, pretty standard 9-to-5 life, and I'd developed my routines like everyone does. Coffee at the place on Larimer Street every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Grocery shopping at the Safeway near my apartment on Sunday afternoons. Gym on Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings. Normal stuff. That's when I first noticed him. He was tall, maybe early 40s, always wore dark jackets and baseball caps. I saw him at the coffee shop first, sitting in the corner with a laptop, and I remember thinking he looked like every other remote worker in Denver. I didn't think anything of it. But then I saw him at Safeway that Sunday in the produce section, and something in my brain made a small connection. Same guy from the coffee shop. Probably lives in the neighborhood, I told myself. But then it kept happening. I'd see him at the gym, always on a treadmill with a clear view of where I worked out. At the coffee shop again. At the grocery store again. Always at a distance, never making eye contact, never approaching. Just there. I started telling myself I was being paranoid. Denver's a city, but my neighborhood wasn't that big. People overlap. We all have our routines, our favorite spots. Then I changed everything. I started going to a different coffee shop across town, one I'd never been to before. Went on a Wednesday instead of Tuesday. I walked in, ordered my latte, turned around, and he was sitting by the window. Same jacket, same baseball cap. My heart did this weird skip, but I forced myself to stay calm. Coincidence, I thought. Maybe he changed his routine too. I switched grocery stores, started going to a King Soopers 20 minutes away on Saturday instead of Sunday. He was in the frozen food aisle. I joined a new gym on the opposite side of the city. He was there on my 3rd visit. That's when the panic started creeping in, this cold feeling in my chest that something was very, very wrong. I stopped going to public places alone. I varied my schedule randomly, sometimes going out at 10 a.m., sometimes at 8 p.m., never the same pattern twice. I drove to random neighborhoods, walked into stores I'd never heard of. He was always there within 20 minutes. I told my roommate Kayla about it, and she suggested I was probably just noticing him more because I was anxious. Frequency illusion, she called it, like when you buy a red car and suddenly see red cars everywhere. But that didn't explain how he showed up at places I'd never been before, at times I'd randomly chosen that same day. I started documenting it, taking photos when I could do it discreetly, writing down times and locations. Over 2 weeks, I confirmed 16 sightings, 16 different locations across the city at completely random times, and he was always there. That's when I decided to check my phone. I'd read articles about stalkers using spyware, hidden tracking apps that run in the background. I went through my phone's settings, checking every app, every permission, every bit of data access. Most of it looked normal. Google Maps had my location history, but that's standard. My fitness app tracked my runs. My banking app knew where I shopped. Then I found it. Buried in my location services under System Services, there was something called Significant Locations. I'd never heard of it. When I clicked on it, my stomach dropped. It was a complete history of everywhere I'd been for the past 8 months. Every address, every store, every coffee shop. How long I'd stayed, how often I visited. Patterns of movement so detailed it was like reading my own diary. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the settings, there was an option I'd never seen before. Share my location. It was turned on, and when I clicked to see who it was shared with, there was one contact listed. A phone number I didn't recognize. No name. Just a number. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Someone had access to my location. Real-time access. They could see exactly where I was right now at any moment. That's how he always knew. He didn't have to follow me, he just had to check his phone and drive to wherever I was. I immediately turned everything off, revoked all permissions, tried to delete the shared contact. But the phone was glitching, freezing every time I tried to remove the number. I restarted it, and when it came back on, the sharing setting was turned on again. That's when I realized someone had deeper access than I could control. This wasn't just an app I'd accidentally downloaded. Someone had gotten into my phone at a system level, maybe through a phishing link or a fake software update. I couldn't trust the device anymore. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage under my apartment building, trying to decide what to do next. Should I go to the police? Factory reset my phone? Buy a burner? I was scrolling through the location history one more time, looking for any clue about when this started, when I glanced up at my rearview mirror. He was standing behind my car. Just standing there, 30 feet back, hands in his pockets, watching me. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because my throat was raw. I threw the car into drive and peeled out of there, nearly hitting a concrete pillar. I drove to the nearest police station, ran inside with my phone, and tried to explain everything. The officer was patient, took notes, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. A tracking app could be explained a dozen ways. Maybe I'd downloaded something and forgotten. Maybe an ex had access to my iCloud. They'd need more evidence to investigate. They told me to factory reset my phone, change all my passwords, file a restraining order if I knew who he was, but I didn't even know his name. I got a new phone the next day, new number, didn't transfer anything from the old device. I moved in with Kayla temporarily, too afraid to go back to my apartment. For 2 weeks, I didn't see him. I started to breathe again, started to think maybe it was over. Then last Tuesday, I was walking out of a Target I'd never been to before, in a part of town I'd randomly chosen that afternoon. My new phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, taken from across the parking lot walking toward my car. The message just said, "New phone, same you." I still don't know who he is. The police opened an investigation, but the phone number was from a burner, untraceable. They checked security footage from a few of the places I'd documented, but he was always careful, always positioned where cameras couldn't get a clear shot of his face. I moved to a different state 3 months ago. I don't use location services anymore. I pay for everything in cash. I don't have social media. I change my routines constantly, never going to the same place twice in a month. But sometimes when I'm standing in line at a coffee shop or walking through a grocery store, I feel it, that cold prickle on the back of my neck. And I'll turn around and scan the crowd, looking for a tall man in a dark jacket and a baseball cap. I haven't seen him yet, but I know that doesn't mean he's not there. Story 2, someone was living in my photos. When I finally zoomed in on the figure standing in the shadow of that alleyway, partially hidden behind a dumpster in a photo I took 6 months ago, I realized they weren't just watching me. They'd been photographing me back, documenting my life the exact same way I documented the city. And in my most recent picture, taken just yesterday morning, they were close enough that I could see they were holding a camera pointed directly at me. I've been a freelance photographer for about 4 years now. Nothing fancy, mostly street photography, urban landscapes, candid shots of city life. I sell prints online, license images to stock sites, do the occasional portrait session to pay rent. It's a good life. I'm out walking around Seattle almost every day, camera in hand, just observing. Photography teaches you to see things other people miss. The way light hits a building at a certain time of day, the expression on someone's face in a crowd, small details that tell bigger stories. So when I finally noticed the pattern in my own work, I couldn't believe I'd missed it for so long. It was late March, and I was editing a batch of photos from the past few months, getting ready to update my portfolio. I work on a big monitor at home, and I'm meticulous about editing, zooming in to check sharpness, adjust shadows, clone out distracting elements. That's when I saw them. In a photo I'd taken at Pike Place Market in February, there was someone standing in the background, partially obscured by a crowd. Just a figure in dark clothes facing toward me. I almost cloned them out, then stopped. Something about their posture, the way they were standing completely still while everyone else was moving, it felt deliberate. I moved to the next photo in the batch, taken the same day about 20 minutes later, different part of the market. And there they were again. Same dark clothes, same stillness, same position, as if they'd moved with me and set up in the background of my next shot. I told myself it was coincidence. The market's crowded, people wander. But I kept noticing them as I edited. A photo from a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, taken through the window from outside. They were across the street, barely visible in the reflection. A sunset shot from Kerry Park with the skyline in the background. They were standing at the edge of the frame, slightly out of focus. I started going back through older photos, searching deliberately now. And that's when my hands started shaking. They were in dozens of them. Different locations, different times of day, different weeks. Always in the background, always partially hidden, always facing toward me. A figure behind a tree, someone standing in a doorway. A silhouette in a window across the street. The consistency was impossible to ignore. I pulled up photos from January. There, December. There, November. There. I went back 6 months, and they were in a photo I'd taken at Golden Gardens Beach on a rainy afternoon in October. I remembered that day because I'd been completely alone, or so I thought. It was off-season, cold, miserable weather. I'd taken maybe 20 photos of the empty shore and left. But in one of those shots, barely visible against the gray sky, there was someone standing up on the bluff behind me, far enough away that they were just a small, dark shape. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I had all these photos on my hard drive, this entire archive of my life, and woven through them was this person, always watching, always there. How had I never noticed? I started examining them more carefully, trying to identify details. But they were always too far away, always in shadow or motion blurred or just out of focus. I couldn't tell if they were male or female, couldn't see their face, couldn't even determine their approximate age. Just a figure, a presence. The worst part was realizing they'd been doing this longer than I had proof of. I only keep about a year of work on my main drive before archiving older projects to external storage, which meant if they were in these photos, they were probably in older ones too. How long had this been going on? I called my friend Blake, another photographer, and asked him to come over. I needed someone else to see this, to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. He showed up an hour later with coffee and his laptop, and I walked him through everything. At first, he was skeptical. "Street photography is full of random people," he said. "You're probably just noticing someone who was in the area." But as I showed him photo after photo, his expression changed. The figure was too consistent, too deliberately positioned, always with a clear sight line to me, never distracted or moving randomly like a normal pedestrian. "Have you checked your recent stuff?" Blake asked quietly. I hadn't. I'd been so focused on going backward through my archive that I hadn't looked at what I'd shot in the past few weeks. I pulled up a folder from earlier that month, March, and started going through the images. The figure was there, but they were closer now. In a photo from 2 weeks ago taken in Fremont, they were maybe 40 feet away instead of their usual 100 plus. In a photo from last week, Pioneer Square, they were close enough that I could make out the shape of a jacket, the suggestion of a hood. And in a photo I'd taken just yesterday, a random street scene in my own neighborhood, they were standing on the sidewalk across from me, maybe 20 feet away. Close enough that when I zoomed in, I could see details I'd never seen before. They were holding a camera, a big DSLR with a telephoto lens, and it was pointed directly at me. Blake went pale. "You need to call the police." I did. I filed a report that afternoon, brought my laptop, showed them everything. The officer was professional, concerned even, but he explained the limitations. The photos proved someone had been in public spaces at the same time as me, but not necessarily that they were stalking me. No threats had been made. No direct contact. They'd need more evidence to investigate further. He suggested I vary my routines, be aware of my surroundings, maybe take a break from my usual photography spots. But photography is my job, and more than that, it's how I process the world. I couldn't just stop. I did start being more careful, though. I'd take a photo, then immediately turn around and scan the area. I started shooting with my phone sometimes instead of my big camera, trying to be less obvious. I changed my walking routes, went out at different times. For about 2 weeks, I didn't see them in any new photos. I started to relax, started to think maybe the police report had scared them off or they'd moved on to someone else. Then 3 days ago, I was home editing and I got a notification that someone had tagged me in a photo on Instagram. My stomach dropped. I don't get tagged often, and when I do, it's usually another photographer I know crediting a collaboration. But the account that tagged me was private, with no profile picture, a random string of numbers for a username. 0 followers, 0 posts except the one I was tagged in. I clicked on it. It was a photo of me, taken from behind, walking down the street with my camera bags, bright daylight. I recognized the location immediately. It was right outside my apartment building. I could see my building number in the background. The photo was high resolution, professional quality, taken with a long lens from far enough away that I'd never noticed. The caption was just one line: "I see you seeing." My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. I reported the account, blocked it, made all my own social media private. But the damage was done. They knew where I lived. They'd been photographing me, curating their own collection of images the same way I'd been unknowingly capturing them. Blake came over that night and helped me cover my windows, set up better locks, install a security camera pointing at my door. He offered to let me stay with him and his partner for a while. But I didn't want to bring this to someone else's home. What if they followed? I started looking through my photos again, this time with a different purpose. I was looking for reflections, for anything that might show their face in a window or a car mirror. And I found something. In a photo from January taken in a shiny storefront window, there was a reflection. Faint, but there. I enhanced it as much as I could without destroying the image. And I could just barely make out features. A person, medium build, dark hair, pale skin. But their face was angled down, deliberately avoiding the reflection, as if they knew exactly where to position themselves. They'd been doing this long enough to be careful, long enough to know how photographers think. I stopped sleeping. Every small sound in my apartment building made me jump. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, convinced someone was outside my door. I started carrying pepper spray. I stopped taking my camera out alone. Yesterday, I was sitting in my apartment, door locked, curtains drawn, trying to work on some editing. And I got an email notification. Someone had purchased a print from my online store. The shipping address was my own apartment. Same building, same unit number. They'd bought one of my photos and had it shipped to me. The photo they selected was one I'd taken in November, a moody shot of an empty street at dusk. When I zoomed in on the original file, they were there in the background, barely visible in the shadows between two buildings, watching me take the picture. The print arrived this morning. I haven't opened it. It's sitting on my kitchen counter and I can't bring myself to touch it. I don't know what they want. I don't know who they are. I don't know how long they've been watching me or why they chose me or what they plan to do with all those photos they've taken. What I do know is that every photo I've taken for the past year, maybe longer, has been a collaboration I never agreed to. Every moment I thought I was alone observing the city, I was being observed right back. I haven't picked up my camera in 3 days. I don't know if I ever will again. Because now when I look at the world, I don't see light and shadow and composition anymore. I just see hiding places, and I know that somewhere someone is standing in one of them, pointing a camera at me, adding another photo to their collection. Story 3. My neighbor's security camera was pointed at my door. I was standing on a chair in my apartment hallway at 11:30 at night, holding my phone up to check the angle of my neighbor's security camera, when I realized it wasn't pointing at his door at all. The lens was aimed directly at my doorknob, close enough and clear enough to capture every single number I entered on my keypad lock. And that's when I remembered I'd been mysteriously locked out twice in the past month. Both times absolutely certain I'd locked the door before leaving. I moved into the apartment building in January, a renovated warehouse conversion in South Boston, the kind of place with exposed brick and industrial lighting that costs way too much but feels safe. Secure entry, cameras in the lobby, good neighborhood. I'm a grad student at Northeastern, so I'm gone a lot, either at campus or the library or my girlfriend's place. I needed somewhere I didn't have to worry about. My neighbor across the hall, I'll call him Derek, moved in about a month after I did. Early 30s, worked from home doing something with tech consulting, always friendly in a generic way. We'd nod in the hallway, make small talk about parking or package deliveries, that kind of thing. Normal neighbor interaction. About 6 weeks ago, he mentioned he was installing a security camera outside his door. Said there'd been some break-ins in other buildings nearby and he wanted to be careful. Made total sense. Half the apartments in the building had Ring doorbells or cameras. I told him I'd been thinking about getting one too. The camera appeared a few days later, mounted on the wall next to his door frame. I didn't look at it closely, why would I? It was his camera, his door, his business. But then Derek started knowing things. Small things at first. I'd run into him in the lobby and he'd ask how my date went the night before, even though I'd never mentioned I had a date. Or he'd comment on how late I'd gotten home from the library down to the approximate time. Once he mentioned my girlfriend had visited using her name even though I'd never introduced them. I figured maybe he'd just heard me talking in the hallway or seen her visiting. The walls weren't that thick, but it felt slightly off, like he was paying a little too much attention. Then I got locked out. It was a Thursday afternoon in late March. I'd left for class that morning, definitely locked my door. I specifically remembered checking it because I was carrying my laptop. When I came home that evening, my key wouldn't turn. The deadbolt was engaged from the inside, which made no sense because I lived alone and my girlfriend was out of town. I had to call the building manager, wait 45 minutes for him to show up with a master key. The whole time I'm standing in the hallway and Derek opens his door to ask what's wrong. I explained the situation and he gave me this sympathetic smile and said, "That's weird. Those electronic locks can be glitchy sometimes." Except I didn't have an electronic lock. I had a regular deadbolt. The building manager got the door open, checked the lock mechanism, said everything looked fine. Maybe I'd been distracted and locked it from the inside out of habit, then left through a window. Except I lived on the 4th floor. He suggested I might want to upgrade to a keypad lock, actually more secure than keys. So I did. Installed it myself the next weekend. Set a 6-digit code. Felt better knowing I had control over it. 2 weeks later, I got locked out again. Same situation. I left in the morning, came home that evening, and the deadbolt was engaged from inside. This time I was absolutely certain I hadn't done it. I'd used the keypad that morning, watched the lock engage, checked the handle. Someone had gone into my apartment and locked it from the inside. The building manager was less patient this time. He opened the door again, walked through my apartment with me, checked all the windows, looked in closets. Nothing was disturbed, nothing missing. No signs of entry. He asked if maybe my girlfriend had a code and had stopped by. She didn't. He suggested I change my code, maybe someone had seen me enter it. That's what stuck with me. Someone seeing my code. I started thinking about that camera across the hall. That night after the building manager left, I waited until Derek went out. I'd heard him leave around 8. Then I dragged a chair into the hallway and climbed up with my phone, positioning it to see what angle his camera actually covered. My blood went cold. The camera wasn't angled down toward his own door like you'd expect. It was angled across the hall, pointed directly at my door, mounted high enough to have a perfect view of my keypad lock. If it had any decent resolution at all, it could easily capture every number I pressed. I took photos of the angle, measured the distance, checked the model number on the camera housing. It was a high-end wireless system with 4K resolution and night vision. Definitely clear enough to read a keypad from 12 feet away. I went back to my apartment and locked the door, my mind racing. Derek had been watching me come and go. He knew my code. He'd been going into my apartment, but why? Nothing was ever missing, nothing disturbed. What was he doing in there? I called my girlfriend, Morgan, and explained everything. She wanted me to call the police immediately, but I hesitated. What would I tell them? My neighbor has a camera that can see my door? That's not illegal. I'd been locked out twice, but nothing was stolen. They'd tell me to change my code and move on. I needed proof. I changed my code that night, didn't use the door for 2 days, only entered and left through the building's garage entrance that bypassed my hallway. Then on Sunday evening, I set up my laptop inside my apartment with the webcam pointed at the door, set it to motion-activated recording, and left for a few hours. When I came back and checked the footage, my hands started shaking. At 7:43 p.m., my door had opened. Just opened from the outside like someone had used a key. But I had the only keys and I'd changed the code. The door stayed open for maybe 8 seconds and then it closed again. No one had entered. They just opened it and stood there. I watched the clip 5 more times. Whoever opened it had stayed in the hallway, out of view of my webcam, just standing in my doorway. I called the police. 2 officers came by an hour later. I showed them everything, the photos of Derek's camera angle, the video of my door opening, my log of both lockouts. They took it seriously, asked a lot of questions, went across the hall and knocked on Derek's door. He wasn't home, or he didn't answer. They explained they'd follow up, talk to him, check if his camera footage showed anything. But without direct evidence of him entering my apartment or making threats, there wasn't much they could do immediately. They suggested I file a restraining order, document everything, maybe install my own camera in the hallway. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the building made me jump. The next morning, Derek knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, that same friendly expression. I didn't open it. "Hey man," he called through the door. "The police came by asking about my camera." I just wanted to explain, the angle is messed up because the mount broke when I installed it. I've been meaning to fix it. I wasn't trying to spy on you or anything. I didn't respond. Anyway, he continued, I checked my footage from the past few weeks like they asked, and I wanted to let you know there's someone else who's been messing with your door. I've got clips of a guy in a hoodie trying your lock at weird hours. You should probably see them for your safety. He slid something under my door, a USB drive. Then I heard him walk away. I stared at that USB drive for 20 minutes before I picked it up. Morgan told me not to plug it into my computer, said it could have malware or spyware. She was probably right, but I had to know. I used an old laptop that wasn't connected to the internet, booted it up, plugged in the drive. There were 4 video files, each a few minutes long, dated over the past 3 weeks. I opened the first one. It showed my hallway, the view from Derek's camera. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago around 3 in the morning. And there, clear as day, was a figure in dark clothes standing at my door trying the handle, entering numbers on the keypad. The video quality was incredible. You could see every detail. Except the figure was Derek. I recognized his jacket, his build, his gait. He was showing me footage of himself breaking into my apartment and pretending it was someone else. I watched all 4 clips. Every single one was him. He'd given me evidence of his own crime, edited to make it look like he was helping me. I called the police back immediately, showed them the files. They went to his apartment again. This time they found him home, and after some conversation I wasn't present for, they arrested him. Turns out Derek had prior incidents in 2 other states, restraining orders from women he'd lived near, accusations of stalking and harassment. He'd been asked to leave his last apartment building after a neighbor found out he'd made a copy of her key. When they searched his apartment, they found folders on his computer. Dozens of video clips from his camera, all focused on me, coming home, leaving, entering my code, having conversations in the hallway. Timestamps going back to the week he moved in. And photos too. Screenshots from the video, close-ups of me organized by date. He'd been cataloging my entire life from across the hall for 3 months. The police told me he'd been entering my apartment regularly, usually when he knew I'd be gone for hours. As far as they could tell, he just walked around, looked at my things, sometimes took photos. He never stole anything. He just wanted to be in my space. I moved out a week later, broke my lease, didn't care about the penalty. I couldn't stay there knowing he'd been inside so many times, touching my things, standing in my bedroom, watching me through that camera. I live in a different building now across the city. I don't have a keypad lock anymore. I installed my own camera inside my apartment, pointed at the door. And I check it obsessively every few hours just to make sure no one's been inside. But the thing I can't stop thinking about, the thing that keeps me up at night, is this. I lived across from him for 3 months. I smiled at him in the hallway. I thought he was just a normal neighbor, maybe a little friendly, a little chatty. And the whole time he was watching every single thing I did, counting the hours I was gone, learning my patterns, walking into my home whenever he wanted. I'll never trust a neighbor again, and I'll never stop wondering how many times he stood in my apartment while I was sleeping, just on the other side of my bedroom door. Story 4. The follower I met through a dating app. When I opened the package sitting on my apartment doorstep and found a framed photograph of the view from my childhood bedroom window, a house I hadn't lived in for 15 years and had never ever mentioned to him, I realized he hadn't just followed me after I ended things. He'd researched everything going back years, maybe decades, building a complete archive of my entire life before he'd ever sent that first message on the app. I'd been single for about 8 months and finally decided to try dating apps. I'm 29, work as a paralegal, live alone in Portland, and honestly, I was just lonely. I downloaded Hinge in February, set up a profile, started swiping. His name was Connor. Attractive, good job in finance, liked hiking and craft beer, all the Portland cliches. We matched, and his first message was actually thoughtful, referenced something specific in my profile about my love of mystery novels. We messaged for a few days, then moved to texting, then set up a date. The first date was nice. Coffee shop in the Pearl District, easy conversation, no awkward silences. He asked good questions, seemed genuinely interested in my answers. We talked about work, hobbies, travel, normal first date stuff. The second date was dinner. That's when I started noticing how many questions he asked. Where exactly did I work? What part of town did I live in? What was my commute like? What gym did I go to? Did I have roommates? What did I do on weekends? At the time, it just seemed like he was being thorough, trying to get to know me. I answered most of them without thinking, gave vague answers to a few that felt too specific. I told him I lived in Northwest Portland but didn't give him my exact address. Said I worked at a law firm downtown but didn't name which one. Third date, we got drinks. He brought up things I'd mentioned casually on previous dates. Remembered details I barely remembered telling him. The name of my best friend from college. The fact that I'd studied abroad in Spain. The kind of tea I liked. It was flattering, honestly. He was attentive, thoughtful. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. An intensity behind his questions, like he was cataloging information, filing it away. After that third date, I told my friend Amber I wasn't sure about him. He's nice, I said, but something feels off. He asks too many questions. She laughed. That means he's interested. Most guys barely listen. So I ignored my instinct and agreed to a fourth date. That's when it got worse. We met for brunch, and within 10 minutes he'd asked about my family. Where did I grow up? Did my parents still live there? Any siblings? What did my dad do for work? I tried to deflect, said I wasn't that close with my family, but he kept circling back to it, pushing gently but persistently. Then he mentioned a specific bookstore I'd posted about on Instagram 2 years ago. He described the photo, quoted the caption. I'd never told him my Instagram handle. I'd been careful not to. My profile was private. How did you find my Instagram? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He smiled. I have my ways. It was supposed to be a joke, I think, but it didn't feel like one. I ended the date early, said I wasn't feeling well. He walked me to my car, and as I was getting in, he said, "You parked in a different spot today. Usually you park on the street." I froze. What do you mean, usually? He backtracked immediately. I just mean like, most people prefer street parking to garages, right? Cheaper. But that's not what he'd said. He'd said usually, like he knew my habits. I drove home with my hands shaking. When I got to my apartment, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, scanning the street, checking my mirrors. I didn't see him, but I felt watched. That night, I sent him a text, polite but clear. I don't think this is working out. You're a nice guy, but I don't feel a connection. I hope you understand. He responded immediately. Can we talk about this? I think we have something really special. I'm sorry, but my decision is final. I wish you the best. 3 more texts came in rapid succession, asking what he'd done wrong, saying he thought we were great together, asking for one more chance. I blocked his number. For about a week, nothing happened. I started to relax, started to think he'd moved on. Then I got a friend request on Facebook from an account with no profile picture, created 3 days earlier. The name was generic. Something like John Anderson, no friends, no posts. I declined it. The next day, another request, different name, same pattern, declined. Then Instagram, a blank account, no followers, following no one, requesting to follow me. Then another, then another. I made all my social media private, changed my settings so only friends could message me. Then the packages started arriving. The first one showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. I came home from work and found a small box on my doorstep, no return address, my name and address printed on a label. Inside was a book. The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. One of my favorite mystery novels, which I'd mentioned on our second date. No note, no explanation, just the book. I texted Amber, told her what happened. She said to document it, but try not to panic. Maybe he ordered it before you broke up and it just arrived now. But the timing felt deliberate. 3 days later, another package. A specific brand of loose-leaf chamomile tea. I'd mentioned it once casually, said it was the only kind I really liked. It's not a common brand. You have to order it online from a specialty store. I didn't open the third package when it arrived. I could feel the shape through the padded envelope. A picture frame. I sat on my couch staring at it for 20 minutes before I finally tore it open. It was a framed photograph of a house, a small blue house with white trim, a maple tree in the front yard, a wooden porch. I recognized it instantly and my stomach dropped. It was my childhood home, the house I grew up in a small town outside Eugene, over 100 miles away. My family sold that house when I was 14. I hadn't been back since. But it wasn't just a photo of the house. It was a photo taken from a specific angle. The view from the second-floor bedroom window, looking out at the street. My bedroom window. I flipped the frame over. On the back, written in neat handwriting, "I know where you come from." My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the frame. It hit the floor and the glass cracked. I called the police. Filed a report, showed them the packages, the blocked messages, explained the whole situation. The officer was sympathetic but said without explicit threats there wasn't much they could do. He suggested I file for a restraining order, document everything, consider installing security cameras. I did all of that. Restraining order filed, cameras installed, deadbolts upgraded. I told my building manager, told my co-workers, told Amber to check in on me daily. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. No packages, no messages, no friend requests. I started to think maybe the restraining order had worked, maybe he'd finally backed off. Then I found the folder. I was going through my email, deleting old messages when I noticed something weird. My Google Drive storage was almost full, which didn't make sense. I barely used it. I clicked to see what was taking up space. There was a folder I hadn't created, named CA. I opened it. Inside were documents, dozens of them. PDFs of my birth certificate, my high school diploma, my college transcripts. Screenshots of my social media posts going back years, including ones from accounts I'd deleted. Photos of me from high school that I'd never posted anywhere online. My parents' address, my old addresses, my employment history, and photos, recent photos, of me walking to my car, entering my building, sitting in a coffee shop, at the grocery store, taken from a distance but clear enough to identify me. Dozens of them organized by date. He'd hacked my Google account. He'd been storing his research there in my own cloud storage like he wanted me to find it eventually. I changed every password I had. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I called the police again, showed them the folder. They opened a more serious investigation, contacted Google for records, started trying to trace how he'd accessed my account. I moved in with Amber temporarily. I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore, couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been inside, that he knew every detail of my space. The police eventually found him. Turns out Connor wasn't even his real name. His actual name was Garrett, and he had a history. 3 prior restraining orders from women in 2 different states. He'd been arrested once for trespassing, once for cyberstalking. He was on probation. When they searched his apartment, they found more folders. Physical ones this time. Files on me, printed documents, more photos, receipts from gifts he'd bought but hadn't sent yet. A list of my routines, places I went regularly, times I was usually home or away. He'd been planning something more, they said. They didn't tell me what. He was arrested, charged with stalking, harassment, violating probation. He's in jail now, waiting for trial. But the thing that haunts me, the thing I can't stop thinking about, is that photograph of my childhood home. That specific angle, that specific view. Because that wasn't something he could have found online. That wasn't public information. Someone had to physically go to that house, go upstairs, stand in what used to be my bedroom and take that photo. Which means at some point, before he ever messaged me on that app, before our first date, before I even knew his name, he'd driven 100 miles to my hometown, found my old house and gone inside. He'd been researching me long before we matched, maybe weeks, maybe months. And I still don't know why he chose me. I still don't know what his endgame was. I still don't know how many hours he spent watching me, following me, cataloging every detail of my life. I deleted all my dating apps. I don't date anymore. I'm thinking about moving to a different city, changing my name, starting over. Because even though he's in jail, even though there's a restraining order, even though I've changed everything, I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over, that somewhere, somehow, he's still watching. Still keeping his files updated, still planning. And I'll never know if the next person I meet, the next friendly conversation, the next innocent date is someone who's already been following me for months. Story 5, I found a tracker hidden in my car. The mechanic held up the small black device he'd just pulled from inside my wheel well, this little magnetic box I'd never seen before, and told me based on the wear and the model it had probably been actively tracking my location for at least 8 months. 8 months. Which meant my ex-boyfriend had planted it before we even broke up, had been watching every single place I drove, every friend's house I visited, every route I took, monitoring my entire life while pretending everything between us was normal. I met Tyler in college. We dated for 3 years, moved in together after graduation, and for a while everything seemed fine. Good even. We had an apartment in Austin, decent jobs, normal relationship stuff. But around the 2-year mark, things started to shift. He got jealous, not in an obvious, explosive way. It was subtle. He'd ask where I'd been after work, why I was 10 minutes later than usual, who I'd been texting. If I went out with friends, he'd want to know exact locations, who else was there when I'd be home. At first, I thought he was just being protective. Then it started to feel like interrogation. We broke up last October. It wasn't dramatic. I just told him I couldn't do it anymore, the constant questions, the lack of trust. He seemed upset but accepted it. He moved out within a week, stayed with a friend, and we split everything cleanly. I kept the car, a used Honda Civic I'd bought before we even met. He took his stuff and we stopped talking. For the first few months after the breakup, I felt relieved, free. I could go where I wanted without explaining myself. But there were weird moments, small things that didn't quite add up. Once I ran into him at a coffee shop across town, nowhere near where he was living. He said he was just passing through, but it was a random Tuesday afternoon and the place was 20 minutes out of his way. Another time, I was having dinner with friends at a restaurant I'd picked last minute, and I saw him drive past outside. Slowly, like he was looking for parking. But he didn't come in, didn't stop, just drove past. I told myself it was coincidence. Austin's not that big, people overlap. But then my friend Lauren mentioned she'd seen him parked outside her apartment building one night. I'd been at Lauren's that evening, staying late watching movies. She said she noticed his car because she recognized the bumper stickers. He was just sitting there, engine off, looking at his phone. "That's creepy," she said. "Do you think he's following you?" I didn't want to believe it. We'd been broken up for 4 months by then. Why would he still care where I was? I started paying more attention, checking my mirrors when I drove, looking for his car in parking lots. I never saw him again, but the feeling didn't go away. The feeling that somehow he knew where I was. Then last month, my car started making a weird rattling sound from the undercarriage. Nothing major, but annoying enough that I took it to my usual mechanic. I dropped it off on a Saturday morning, told him it was probably something loose, and went to get coffee while I waited. He called me an hour later. "Can you come back to the shop? There's something you need to see." His voice was serious. I walked back, my stomach already knotting up. He led me into the garage bay where my car was up on the lift. "I found the rattle," he said, "but I also found this." He held up a small black box, maybe the size of a deck of cards, with a magnetic strip on one side. "It's a GPS tracker. It was tucked up inside your rear wheel well, held in place with the magnet. I almost missed it." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean, a GPS tracker?" "Someone put it there to track your car's location. You can see the wear on the magnet, the dirt buildup. This has been here a while, months at least, based on how it looks." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Can you tell how long?" He examined it more closely. "Hard to say exactly, but this model is pretty common. They run on batteries that last about a year. Judging by the condition, I'd guess it's been active for 6 to 8 months. Maybe longer. 8 months. That meant it had been there before Tyler and I broke up. He'd put it on my car while we were still together. I called the police from the shop. 2 officers came out, took the device, asked me questions. Did I know who might have placed it? Did I have any suspicions? I told them about Tyler, about the breakup, about the weird sightings. They explained that without proof of who installed it, they couldn't arrest anyone, but they'd open an investigation. They suggested I check if the tracker was linked to any online accounts, see if I could trace who was monitoring it. I went home and did some research. The model was a common one sold on Amazon, usually marketed for tracking teenage drivers or fleet vehicles. It connected to an app where the owner could see real-time location data, set up alerts, view history. I tried to access the app using the device's serial number, but it required a password. I contacted the manufacturer, explained the situation, asked if they could provide information about who purchased it. They said they'd cooperate with law enforcement, but couldn't give me personal details. The police followed up a few days later. They'd contacted Tyler, asked him about the tracker. He denied everything. Said he'd never heard of it, had no idea how it got there, suggested maybe someone else had put it on my car. There was no proof he'd purchased it. He could have paid cash, used a fake name, bought it secondhand. Without concrete evidence, they couldn't charge him. But I knew it was him. Who else would have had access to my car for months? Who else would care enough to track every place I went? I started going back through my life, retracing the past 8 months, thinking about all the times he'd shown up unexpectedly or mentioned things he shouldn't have known. Like the time, 2 months after we broke up, when he texted me asking if I was okay because he'd heard I'd been at the hospital. I had been at the hospital visiting my mom after a minor surgery, but I hadn't told him. I hadn't posted about it. How did he know? Or the time he called me casually mentioning he was thinking about checking out a new hiking trail, the exact one I'd driven to the day before with friends. I hadn't posted about that either. He'd known everywhere I went, every friend I visited, every weekend trip, every late night at a coworker's house, every date I went on after we broke up. He'd had a front row seat to my entire life, watching me move on, watching me rebuild without him. The worst part was realizing he'd put the tracker on before the breakup, which meant he'd been suspicious of me, monitoring me, maybe looking for proof I was cheating or lying or doing something to justify his paranoia. And when he didn't find anything when the breakup happened anyway, he just kept watching. I felt violated in a way I'd never experienced before. It wasn't just that he'd tracked my car. It was that he'd stolen my privacy, my freedom, my sense of safety. Every moment I thought I was alone, moving through my life independently, he was there, digitally, watching. I got a new car. Traded in the Civic, didn't care that I lost money on the deal. I couldn't drive it anymore, couldn't shake the feeling that there might be another tracker I'd missed, or that he'd find a way to put a new one on. I moved apartments, changed my phone number, blocked him on every platform, filed for a restraining order which was granted after I provided evidence of the tracker and the police report. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. When the police checked the tracker's data history through the manufacturer, they found logs going back 10 months. 10 months of location data, time-stamped, showing every place I'd been, but the tracker itself, according to the mechanic, had only been on my car for about 8 months based on the wear, which means there was another tracker before this one. He'd replaced it at some point, maybe when the battery died, maybe when he upgraded to a newer model. How long had he really been tracking me? How far back did this go? I think about all the times, even before I noticed anything strange, when Tyler would mention places I'd been or people I'd seen. I'd thought he was just paying attention, being a good boyfriend. Now I realize he wasn't paying attention to me. He was paying attention to my data. The restraining order is in place. He's not supposed to contact me or come within 500 feet. But that doesn't mean he's stopped. For all I know, he's found another way. Maybe he's tracking my phone now. Maybe he's following me in a different car. Maybe he's moved on to someone else. I check my new car obsessively. Every few days I get underneath with a flashlight and inspect the wheel wells, the undercarriage, anywhere a small device could hide. I haven't found anything, but I also never found that first tracker. I only knew it existed because my car happened to start rattling. I'll never know for sure if I'm being followed. I'll never trust that I'm actually alone. Because Tyler taught me that the people closest to you, the people you live with and trust and love, can be watching you the entire time, cataloging your life, and you'll never know until they want you to know. I still catch myself checking my mirrors constantly when I drive, scanning parking lots for his car, taking random turns to see if anyone follows. I probably look paranoid, but the thing is, I wasn't paranoid enough before. And now I'll never stop wondering, is someone watching me right now at this very moment and I just haven't found their tracker yet? Story 6. The jogger who ran past my house. Every morning I'd been keeping detailed logs for 2 weeks. Timestamps written in a notebook I kept by the window, and the pattern was undeniable. The same man in running clothes had passed my house 34 times in 14 days, sometimes 4 times in a single morning, always slowing down when he reached my porch. And when I finally confronted him on day 15 asking why he jogged past my house so often, he smiled at me and described the inside of my living room, down to the color of the throw pillows on my couch, pillows that weren't visible from any window. I bought my house in suburban Michigan about a year ago. Small 2-bedroom bungalow, quiet street, mostly young families and retirees. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, so I'm there most of the day, and I've gotten to know the rhythms of the neighborhood. The mail carrier comes at 2. Kids walk to school around 7:30. People walk their dogs in the evenings. And every single morning at 6:47, a jogger ran past my house. I first noticed him in late March. I'm an early riser, usually having coffee on my front porch by 6:30, watching the sunrise, easing into my day. He'd run past, wave, and I'd wave back. Friendly neighbor stuff. He was probably in his late 30s, average build, always wore dark running gear and a baseball cap. After a week of this, I recognized the routine. 6:47 like clockwork. I even started expecting him, timing my coffee refill so I'd be on the porch when he passed. It felt nice, honestly. like a small shared ritual with a stranger. A wave, a nod, a momentary connection that said we're both up early, we're both starting the day. Then one morning in early April, I woke up around 5:30 with a headache. Couldn't fall back asleep, so I made coffee early and sat on the porch in the pre-dawn darkness. At 5:53, the jogger ran past. I almost didn't process it at first. My brain chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe he was starting early today, changing his routine. But it felt off. Same guy, same outfit, same route. Then at 6:47, he ran past again. I sat up straighter, watched him disappear down the street. That was weird. 2 runs in an hour? Maybe he'd forgotten something and doubled back. But he'd been coming from the same direction both times. I didn't see him the rest of that day, and I told myself I'd imagined it or misidentified someone. But the next morning I paid closer attention. 6:47 like usual. He waved. I waved back, but I watched him more carefully this time. His pace, his gait, the way he held his shoulders. It was definitely the same person I'd seen earlier, and then at 7:35 he ran past again. This time I stood up, leaned against the porch railing, and watched until he turned the corner at the end of the block. Same guy, same running clothes, same route. I started keeping a log. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented every time I saw him. I didn't sit on the porch every single moment, but I worked near a window that faced the street, so I had a pretty good view. Here's what I found. He ran past my house at least 3 times a day. Sometimes 4, sometimes 5. The 6:47 pass was consistent, almost like he'd set an alarm for it. But the other times varied. Sometimes 9 in the morning, sometimes 11, sometimes 2 in the afternoon, sometimes 6 in the evening. He wasn't jogging around the neighborhood on a loop. He was jogging the same route past my house specifically, over and over. I asked my neighbor, an older woman named Pauline, who'd lived on the street for 20 years, if she knew him. "The jogger?" she said. "I've seen him, sure. Health nut, I guess. Some people just love running. Do you know where he lives?" She shrugged. "No idea, maybe a few streets over." But that didn't make sense. If he lived nearby, why would he run past my house specifically multiple times a day, always the same route? I started paying attention to his behavior. Every time he passed, he'd slow down slightly when he reached my property line. Not a full stop, just a subtle deceleration, like he was catching his breath or checking his watch. But his head would turn toward my house. Just a quick glance, but it was there. Every time. I stopped sitting on the porch. Started watching from inside through the window, where he couldn't see me as easily. He still slowed down, still looked. One morning I decided to test something. I stayed inside, kept all my curtains closed, made it look like I wasn't home. I watched through a tiny gap in the blinds. At 6:47, he ran past, slowed down, stopped completely, just stood there on the sidewalk facing my house for maybe 10 seconds. Then he checked his phone, looked around like he was making sure no one was watching, and continued jogging. My hands were shaking. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't a random jogger on a routine. He was monitoring my house, checking to see if I was home. I called my friend Austin, told him what was happening. He suggested I confront the guy, ask him directly why he kept running past. "Maybe there's a reasonable explanation," Austin said. "Maybe he's training for a marathon and this is just his route." But 34 times in 2 weeks? That wasn't training. That was surveillance. Still, I decided to try. The next morning, I waited on the porch. When he ran past at 6:47, I called out, "Hey, excuse me." He stopped, jogged in place for a second, then walked over to the edge of my yard. Up close, I could see he was older than I'd thought, maybe early 40s, with sharp features and pale eyes. "Morning," he said, slightly out of breath. "I've noticed you run past here a lot," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "Do you live nearby?" He smiled. "Yeah, just a few blocks over. I like this route. Peaceful street." "Do you run it multiple times a day?" His smile didn't falter. "Sometimes, depends on my schedule, training for a half marathon." "That's cool," I said, even though my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "I've just been seeing you a lot. Wanted to make sure everything was okay." "Everything's great," he said. Then he looked at my house. Really looked at it, scanning the windows, the door, the layout. "Nice place you've got. I like the yellow paint. And those blue throw pillows on your couch, they really brighten up the room." My blood went cold. The throw pillows on my couch were blue, but they weren't visible from outside. My front window had sheer curtains and the couch was positioned against the far wall. You couldn't see it from the street or even from the porch. You'd have to be inside the house or at least looking through a different window at a specific angle. "How do you know what color my throw pillows are?" I asked, my voice shaking. His expression didn't change. "I must have seen them through the window. They're not visible from the street." He shrugged, still smiling. "Maybe I noticed them another time. Anyway, I should finish my run. Have a good day." And he jogged off, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. I went inside immediately, locked every door and window, checked every room. Nothing was disturbed, nothing missing. But he'd been inside somehow, or close enough to see inside. Maybe while I was out, maybe while I was sleeping. I called the police, told them everything, the repeated jogging, the logs I'd kept, the comment about my pillows. They sent an officer out to take a report. He was professional, took notes, but I could tell he didn't think it was urgent. "Has he threatened you?" the officer asked. "No, but he's been past my house over 30 times in 2 weeks. It's a public street, he's allowed to jog." He described the inside of my house. "Did you see him enter your house?" "No, but without evidence of trespassing or a direct threat, there's not much we can do. But I'll document this, and if he escalates, call us immediately." I installed security cameras that afternoon, one facing the street, one on the back door, one on the side of the house. I checked the footage obsessively. He ran past 6 times that day, and at 2:30 in the morning, the back camera picked up movement. A figure dressed in dark clothes walking slowly along the back of my house, looking in windows. The footage was grainy, but the build matched. It was him. I called the police again. This time, they took it more seriously. They came out, reviewed the footage, put out a patrol to look for him. But he was gone. The next day, I got a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just my first name written on the envelope. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten, "You have a lovely home. I enjoy watching you enjoy it." I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up with a baseball bat next to my bed, checking the camera feeds every 10 minutes. The police increased patrols on my street, and I gave them everything. The logs, the video footage, the letter. They said it was enough to investigate for stalking, possibly trespassing. 2 days later, they identified him. His name was Kyle, lived about a mile away, no prior record, but had recently been fired from a job at a home security company. He'd installed systems for houses in my neighborhood, including, according to their records, a consultation at my house 6 months before I bought it, when the previous owners lived there. He knew the layout. He knew where the windows were, where the weak points were. He'd probably kept records, photos, keys. They arrested him for stalking and attempted trespassing. Found more evidence at his house. Photos of my street, of my house specifically, printed and organized in a folder. A schedule of my routines. Notes about when I was home, when I was gone. He'd been planning something. The police wouldn't tell me what they thought, but the implication was clear. He's awaiting trial now, restraining order in place. I've upgraded every lock, installed an alarm system, keep the cameras running 24/7. But I'll never feel safe in this house again. Because every time I look out that front window, I picture him jogging past, slowing down, looking in. Every time I walk through my living room, I think about him describing my throw pillows, proving he'd been close enough to see inside, maybe even been inside when I wasn't home. And I'll never stop wondering how many times did he come to my windows at night before I installed cameras? How many times did he stand there in the dark watching me through the glass? I don't sit on my porch anymore. I keep my curtains closed all day. I check the locks 3 times before bed, and sometimes late at night I swear I hear footsteps on the sidewalk outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps, stopping right in front of my house. Story 7. Someone kept requesting to follow me online. I'd been denying follow requests for 3 months, dozens and dozens of them, all from blank accounts with randomly generated usernames created within days of each other, when one of them finally sent me a direct message that made my stomach drop. It was a photo of me sitting in my apartment, taken from street level through my window, with a caption that read, "You can't hide from me by going private." And that's when I understood that whoever was doing this had been escalating from digital to physical, and they were standing outside my building right now. I've had Instagram since college, nothing fancy, just a personal account where I post photos of my life. Coffee cups, sunsets, pictures with friends, my cat, normal stuff. I'm not an influencer. I had maybe 300 followers, most of them people I actually knew. In January, I started getting follow requests from accounts I didn't recognize. At first, it wasn't alarming. Random people request to follow you sometimes, bots or strangers who found you through hashtags. I'd just deny them and move on. But then it started happening every day. Blank profile pictures. Usernames that were just random strings of letters and numbers like KJO47HSN29 or RX83MDZRBZM1. No posts, no followers, no following. Brand new accounts all created within the same week. I denied them, then more appeared. I denied those, more appeared. After 2 weeks, I'd denied maybe 20 requests. After a month, closer to 50. I made my account private, changed my username, removed my last name from my bio. It didn't matter. The requests kept coming. Then they spread. I started getting friend requests on Facebook from similar accounts. No profile pictures, generic names like Mike Johnson or Lisa Smith, created recently, no mutual friends. I denied them, tightened my privacy settings, made it so only friends of friends could find me. The requests kept coming, then LinkedIn, then Twitter, then Venmo, which I barely even used publicly. Somehow, whoever this was had found every single platform I was on and was creating accounts to try to connect with me. I was living in Chicago, working as a middle school teacher, living alone in a studio apartment in Wicker Park. My routine was pretty consistent. School during the day, home by 4, quiet evenings with my cat Benson. I wasn't particularly active online outside of Instagram. Didn't post my location, didn't check in places. I was careful. But someone had found me anyway. I started documenting the requests, taking screenshots every time a new one came in. I wanted to see if there was a pattern, something that might tell me who was behind them. But there was nothing. The accounts were too generic, too empty. No information, no clues. My friend Rachel suggested I just delete my accounts, go offline completely. If it's bothering you this much, just step away from social media for a while. But that felt like letting them win. Why should I have to disappear because some creep was harassing me? In late February, the requests stopped for about a week. I thought maybe it was over, maybe they'd gotten bored and moved on to someone else. Then I got a message. It was on Instagram from one of the blank accounts that had requested to follow me weeks earlier. I denied the request, but Instagram still lets people send you one message even if you don't follow them back. The message was just a photo. No text, no explanation. Just a photo. It was me, sitting in my apartment on my couch with Benson on my lap. The photo was taken from outside through my window from street level. I could see my face clearly, could see the book I'd been reading on the coffee table, could see the lamp in the corner. It was recent, maybe from the past few days based on what I was wearing. Underneath the photo in the message preview, it said, "You can't hide from me by going private." My hands started shaking. I dropped my phone and it clattered onto the floor. Benson jumped off my lap, startled. Someone had been outside my apartment. Someone had stood on the street, looked up at my second-floor window and taken my photo. And then they'd sent it to me to make sure I knew. I ran to the window and yanked the curtains closed. Then I checked every lock on my door, the deadbolt, the chain. I looked through the peephole, half expecting to see someone standing in the hallway. No one was there. I called Rachel. She came over within 20 minutes, and I showed her the message, the photo, all the screenshots I'd been taking of the follow requests. "This is stalking," she said. "You need to go to the police." I filed a report that night, brought my phone, showed them everything. The officer took it seriously, especially the photo. That crossed the line from online harassment into physical stalking. They opened an investigation, said they'd try to trace the accounts, see if they could identify who was behind them. But Instagram accounts are easy to fake. Burner emails, VPNs, fake names. Unless the person made a mistake, left some kind of digital trail, it would be nearly impossible to trace. The officer suggested I install security measures, maybe a camera, definitely new locks. He also suggested I consider staying somewhere else temporarily, just until they could figure out who was doing this. I didn't want to leave my apartment. It was my space, my home. But I also couldn't stop thinking about that photo, about someone standing outside in the dark, looking up at my window, watching me. I bought blackout curtains the next day, installed a deadbolt and a chain lock, set up a small security camera facing my door. For a few days, nothing happened. No new follow requests, no messages. I started to think maybe the police report had scared them off. Then I got a package. It was sitting outside my door when I came home from work on a Thursday. A small padded envelope, my name and address handwritten on the label, no return address. I didn't want to open it. I stood there in the hallway staring at it for a full minute, my heart racing. But eventually I picked it up, brought it inside and carefully tore it open. Inside was a USB drive, just a plain black USB drive, no label, no note. I knew I shouldn't plug it into my computer. Rachel had warned me about malware, about spyware, about all the ways someone could hack your devices. But I had to know what was on it. I used an old laptop that wasn't connected to the internet, the one I kept for emergencies. Booted it up, plugged in the drive. There was one folder. Inside were photos, hundreds of them, photos of me, walking to my car, entering my building, at the grocery store, at school, sitting at a coffee shop, all taken from a distance, all without my knowledge. They were organized by date, going back months, some from January, some from December, some even older. Whoever this was had been following me, photographing me, documenting my life for at least 6 months, maybe longer. And at the bottom of the folder was a text file. I opened it. It just said, "I see you every day. You're beautiful when you don't know you're being watched." I unplugged the USB drive, threw it across the room and ran to the bathroom to throw up. Rachel came over again. We called the police again. I handed over the USB drive, showed them the photos, the text file. They said it was evidence, that they'd analyze it for metadata, for anything that might identify the person who created it. I moved out of my apartment the next day, packed a bag, left most of my stuff and stayed with Rachel while I figured out what to do next. The police eventually traced the package. It had been dropped off at a UPS store, paid for in cash. No cameras in the area that caught a clear view of who sent it. Another dead end. The follow requests started again a week later. Different accounts, same pattern. I deleted Instagram entirely, then Facebook, then Twitter, then everything. I wiped my digital presence as much as I could. But I still get emails sometimes, from addresses I don't recognize, with subject lines that say things like, "I miss seeing you online," or "You can't hide forever." I delete them without opening, but they keep coming. I moved to a different apartment, across the city. Didn't tell anyone except Rachel and my family where I was going. New building, higher floor, windows that face an interior courtyard instead of the street. But I still keep my curtains closed. I still check the locks 3 times before bed. I still look over my shoulder when I walk to my car. Because whoever was doing this, whoever spent months creating fake accounts and following me and photographing me and sending me that USB drive, they're still out there. They know what I look like. They know my routines, my habits, my patterns. And even though I've disappeared online, even though I've moved and changed my number and tried to erase myself, I can't shake the feeling that they're still watching. Maybe from a distance now, maybe waiting. Maybe planning their next move. I'll never know if I'm safe. I'll never know if that person standing across the street is just a stranger or the same person who sent me that photo, that USB drive, those hundreds of follow requests. I'll never know if I'm being watched right now, and that's the worst part. Not knowing, never knowing. Story 8. I kept seeing the same car everywhere I went. I'd been testing it for 3 days, taking random routes, making sudden turns, driving to parts of the city I'd never been to before, and every single time, within 10 to 15 minutes, the silver sedan with tinted windows would appear in my rearview mirror, keeping exactly the same distance behind me. And then last Tuesday, after getting home late from a friend's house, I found a photo tucked under my windshield wiper. It was me, getting into my car that morning in my driveway, and on the back someone had written in careful handwriting, "I've been with you the whole time. You just never noticed until now." I drive a lot for work. I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep, so I'm constantly on the road visiting doctors' offices and clinics around the metro area. I cover most of the Dallas-Fort Worth region, which means I'm in my car at least 4 hours a day, sometimes more. About 2 months ago, I started noticing a silver sedan that seemed to show up behind me a lot. It was a common car, maybe a Toyota Camry or a Honda Accord, hard to tell the exact model. Tinted windows, no distinguishing features, Texas plates. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Lots of people drive silver sedans, but then I started seeing it in places that didn't make sense. I'd finish a meeting at a clinic in Plano, get in my car, and the silver sedan would be a few cars back in traffic. Then I'd drive 20 minutes south to a different appointment in Richardson, and the same car would be behind me again. I told myself it was coincidence. We were probably on similar routes, both heading the same direction. Lots of people commute between those areas. But then I saw it at the gym. I go to a 24-hour gym near my apartment in Addison, usually late at night after work, around 9 or 10 p.m. It's not on my usual work route, not near any of the clinics I visit. And one night after finishing my workout, I walked out to the parking lot and saw the silver sedan parked 3 rows over. My stomach did this weird flip. I stood there for a second, staring at it, trying to see if anyone was inside. The tinted windows made it impossible to tell. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove home. The silver sedan pulled out behind me and followed at a distance for about a mile before turning off. Maybe they just happened to go to the same gym. Maybe they live in the area. But then I saw it at the grocery store and at a restaurant I'd made last-minute reservations at across town. and outside my friend Megan's apartment building when I went to visit her. Every single time it was parked somewhere nearby, or it would appear in traffic behind me shortly after I left. I started paying closer attention, taking note of when and where I saw it. Over the course of 2 weeks, I documented at least a dozen sightings. Different locations, different times of day, but always the same car. I tried to get a look at the driver, but every time I glanced back, the tinted windows made it impossible. Just a vague shape behind the wheel, never clear enough to identify. I told Megan about it. She suggested I was probably just noticing the car more now that I was looking for it, like that thing where you learn a new word and suddenly hear it everywhere. "It's a common car," she said. "You're probably just seeing different silver sedans and thinking it's the same one." But I didn't think so. The car had a small dent on the rear bumper driver's side. I'd noticed it one day when it was stopped at a light behind me. And every time I saw the car after that, I checked. Same dent, same position. It was definitely the same vehicle. I decided to test it. One Saturday, I drove to a part of Fort Worth I'd never been to before. I picked a random address on my GPS, a neighborhood I had no reason to visit, and drove there, taking a weird, winding route with lots of turns. 15 minutes after I arrived, the silver sedan drove past. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't coincidence. This was deliberate. Someone was following me. I drove home a different way, taking back roads and side streets, making random turns without signaling. The sedan stayed with me, always a few cars back, never close enough to be obvious, but always there. When I got home, I parked in my driveway and sat there for a minute, watching my mirrors. The sedan drove past my house slowly, then continued down the street and disappeared around the corner. I called the police, explained the situation, told them I thought someone was following me. They asked if I knew who it might be. An ex? A co-worker? Someone with a grudge? I didn't have any exes who'd be this obsessive. No recent breakups, no drama. My co-workers were fine. I couldn't think of anyone who'd want to follow me. The officer said without a clear threat or evidence of intent to harm, there wasn't much they could do. Following someone on public roads isn't technically illegal unless it crosses into stalking or harassment. He suggested I document everything, try to get a license plate number, and call back if the behavior escalated. I started taking different routes to work, varying my schedule, leaving at random times. It didn't matter. The sedan would always appear within minutes. I tried to get the license plate number, but the car always stayed far enough back that I couldn't read it clearly. And when I'd slow down to let it get closer, it would slow down too, maintaining the distance. Whoever was driving knew I was aware of them now, and they didn't care. I stopped going to the gym, stopped visiting friends alone, started working from home more, reducing the time I spent on the road. But even on days I barely left my apartment, I'd see the silver sedan drive past my building. Slowly, like they were checking to see if my car was in the driveway. Then about 2 weeks ago, things got worse. I came home late one night after having dinner at a friend's place in Irving, somewhere I'd randomly suggested that same afternoon. I pulled into my driveway around 11 p.m., exhausted, ready to sleep. There was something on my windshield, a piece of paper tucked under the wiper blade. I got out slowly, looking around the dark street. No one was visible, no cars idling nearby. I pulled the paper free. It was a photo, printed on regular printer paper, but high quality, clear and sharp. It was me, getting into my car that morning right here in my driveway. I was holding my coffee mug, had my bag over my shoulder, keys in hand. The photo was taken from across the street, from an angle that suggested the person had been parked there, watching my house, waiting for me to leave. I flipped the paper over. On the back, written in blue ink, neat handwriting. I've been with you the whole time. You just never noticed until now." I dropped the photo. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone to call the police. They came out this time, took the photo as evidence, searched the area. No sign of anyone, no silver sedan parked nearby. They took a statement, said they'd increase patrols in my neighborhood, told me to install security cameras and consider staying somewhere else temporarily. I installed cameras the next day, one facing the driveway, one facing the street. I stayed with Megan for a few nights, too scared to sleep in my own apartment. When I finally came back, I checked the camera footage from the past 72 hours. The silver sedan had driven past my house 11 times, always between midnight and 5 a.m. when I wasn't home. Slowly, deliberately. Once it had stopped in front of my driveway for almost 30 seconds before driving away. I sent the footage to the police. They enhanced it, tried to get the license plate, but the angle and resolution made it impossible. They ran the make and model through databases, but there were thousands of silver sedans registered in the area. Another dead end. I don't drive much anymore. I've switched to mostly virtual meetings, doing calls instead of in-person visits. My sales numbers have dropped and my boss has started asking questions, but I can't explain to him that I'm terrified to get in my car because someone has been following me for 2 months and I don't know who they are or what they want. I see the sedan less often now, maybe once or twice a week, always at a distance. Maybe they've backed off, or maybe they're just being more careful. But last week I found another photo. This one was slipped into my mailbox. It was me, sitting in my car in a parking lot looking at my phone. Taken recently, within the past few days, based on what I was wearing. On the back, the same handwriting. I'm still here. I don't know who's doing this. I don't know why they chose me. I don't know what they want or what they're planning. What I do know is that every time I get in my car now, I check my mirrors obsessively. Every silver sedan I see makes my heart race. Every car that stays behind me for more than a few blocks sends me into a panic, and I know logically that they're probably watching me right now. Parked somewhere nearby, waiting to see where I go next, documenting my life one photo at a time. I'll never feel safe driving again. I'll never stop looking over my shoulder, because somewhere out there someone has been following me for months, learning my patterns, my routines, my life. And I still don't know who they are, but they know everything about me.